I want to ask you a bunch of questions, and I want to have them answered immediately.
If you're not subscribed to this YouTube channel, you've been sent this video by somebody you know as an appeal to understand what's really going on with the current CV crisis. You can't be told what's actually happening. If I just tell you, you won't believe me. You must see it for yourself. The process must start with a series of questions. I will propose the questions, but you must ask these questions of yourself, to yourself. They can't come from me. I can't ask you these questions. I can only present the questions in the order in which they must be considered. To go the whole way, you must take the question and ask yourself. Now, it's likely you've already discredited the narrator of this video, and you're setting yourself up to discard whatever is about to come. This is understandable. I'm a nameless, faceless person, and therefore won't be able to convince you of anything. You must convince yourself by being completely honest. You must hear the question, pause, and ask the question to yourself. Now, this is very uncomfortable because it brings very unnerving revelations when you challenge yourself. But are you prepared to go through this process? There's a lot riding on it, and a very negative outcome for the world if enough people aren't mature enough to consider what follows. Let's start. Initially here, I'm not specifically referencing the current situation. The general question is, do you acknowledge that it's possible for a remedy to be worse than the problem it's trying to solve? Do you acknowledge it's possible for a remedy or a solution to be worse than the problem it's trying to solve? In general, just acknowledge this. For example, many examples pop up. A dentist may offer a mother to remove all of her child's teeth because that child eats a lot of candy and cavities will surely follow and can be avoided by removing the teeth. Now, I'm sure you can see there are thousands of these potential examples anybody could come up with, whether they're serious or the absurd, like I just presented. So to this question, do we agree it's possible for a remedy to cause more harm than good? Last set of instructions, I promise. It's important in this video, critical, that you actively acknowledge you agree if you do agree. Even if it's just a nod of your head, an active participation is essential. If you're sitting back in a comfy leather chair and simply watching this with the mentality one has while watching TV, for example, nothing that I'm attempting to communicate will get through to you. I'm not there with you. So at certain times in this video or presentation, I need to make a few assumptions. So here, related to the last question, I think for this one, it's pretty safe to assume that you agree there is a possibility, and there have been real cases in the past where the remedy or solution or implementation of something is far worse than the problem it's trying to solve.
In any case, were I to invoke logic, logic clearly dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Or the one.
Well, I'd better get to the rest of the questions and promise they won't take as long as that opening segment, or you'll be abandoning me for reruns of the Connors, or heck, even old Roseanne sitcoms. So, ask yourself this. Number one, is destroying the global economy for 10 years or more worth saving less than 0.25% of the world's population from a bad flu? 0.25%. Is it worth destroying the global economy over? The death rate, even per their own statistics, is no higher than about 2%. And that's the statistic for those who actually contract what they call CV. If society just did nothing and let it spread, most people would not contract it. This is what a healthy immune system is for. Doctors see patients every winter, and they rarely get sick. And don't tell me about the flu shot that was administered to the doctors. The person they're seeing in the waiting room got the flu shot too. And there's also a variety of other things that doctors come in contact with that they don't get from their patients all winter long, from strep throat to pink eye. So if you just let it go, how many people would get it with strong immune systems? Is it worth destroying the entire economy over? Most people, flu shot or not, go many years without getting the seasonal flu. The ugly truth of this, though, is never presented in the news, is it? If this, quote, lockdown goes just a few more weeks, approximately 1 billion people around the world will experience some sort of financial hardship. 1 billion people, if it goes just a few more weeks. Financial hardship. If it goes into the summer, it'll make the Great Depression of 1929 look like a minor blip in history. What did Spock say in that clip, if you remember? Needs of the many, needs of the few? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. For those who think that all I'm talking about is a trade-off between fringe economic prosperity and saving lives, this is beyond short-sighted. I'm not talking about someone's inability in the future to not be able to afford a new speedboat versus saving lives. Most of the billion people who will fall into economic crisis if this goes just a few more weeks will be lower middle class and the poor. Of this 800 million or so people, many won't be able to afford health insurance. Many won't be able to afford their medicines, even life-saving medicines, going forward with the financial hardship that's going to be imposed, that's starting right now. These people will trade in expensive vegetables and high-quality foods for their children for McDonald's not-so-Happy Meals. At least there's a toy inside the Happy Meal, a plastic syringe. The cancer incidence and incidence of other diseases from poor nutrition in about 1 billion people who have had their jobs destroyed in this self-imposed lockdown will spike up through the roof. Only oncology specialists will be McDonald's love in the next 10 years. Poor nutrition and inadequate medicines alone will eclipse the deaths of any so-called killer CV in just a few years' time if considered on a worldwide scale. Of course, the subsistence farmers and rice paddy planters around the world are the only ones who will be unaffected because they don't need no green paper with strange runes and strange symbols on the back to buy their food. The villages in Africa who cook on oil drum rocket stoves will be generally unaffected, as will be the Amish, who will float notes in rivers and streams toward Philadelphia and towards Pittsburgh that say, "You iPhone-loving motherfuckers thought you were so smart." Then there's the general stress of what's happening right now, both what people are experiencing by absorbing all this negativity through their television with their daily activities, like people having to fight over toilet paper or hope that their favorite products are still down at the store. The stress of not being able to pay rent in the future. There's hundreds of things that are coming along with this situation. So have the people who believe that these draconian lockdown measures are necessary to save lives, have they even considered the hundreds of millions of waiters, hotel workers, daily laborers, other types of people like that who are stressing out about not being able to, say, pay their rent, about not being able to pay for their daughter's or son's medicines, are stressing out. These people, you understand, they don't have the luxury like a corporate cubicle worker does to sit at home at a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 company, to sit at home and continue to collect their paycheck and continue to collect their benefits. Tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people only get paid when they work. Stress causes all sorts of disease. We all know this. Right now, just a small number of people on Earth, about 4 billion, are really stressed out. About a few hundred million in some way will succumb to their stress if the financial hardship comes. If this goes on just a few more weeks, tens of millions of them will die over the next 5 to 10 years. And why all of this? To save a few 100,000 today? Or far less? Again, we're weeks away from the point where, in terms of the suffering that will be inflicted over the next 10 years, it will have been far better to just let the virus run its course. Therefore, people must stop and ask themselves, what's really going on here? What authority is imposing on us now is like meningitis breaking out on a submarine, on a Soviet submarine in 1975, and the captain deciding to scuttle the ship in the Lorenthrol Trench from the Hunt for Red October, because that's the only way we can stop its spread, to take the whole submarine down. Time for a fun fact between sections. Did you know the CV is extremely common and has been around basically forever? There are 1960s Lysol cans that mention it by name. Yeah, right on the gold can. Kills 99.9%. Right there. The CV, right on the can. Most people have had something labeled CV many times in their lifetime. It's a broad classification of things we've all had. I admit they call this one novel, saying it has unique characteristics, even though it's generally the same class. Question 2 to ask yourself. Why are the parks, lakes, rivers, streams, local parks, state parks, national parks, and beaches all closed? Valley Forge Park, at like thousands and thousands of acres, is big enough where even on July 4th, there's nothing that can be remotely considered to be like people crowding together. It's just too big. On most days, any other day except the 4th, there are only like 5 to 10 people you run across per square mile. Aren't we told that getting fresh air and a bit of sun is the healthiest thing we can do for ourselves at this time? Or at any time? I've asked people this question specifically about the beaches, and what they come up with is nonsensical. One person I know in Florida now explained to me that the beaches are closed because of the spring break there. Okay, I see that. I guess all the young people were all oiled up and sliding up and down next to each other on the beach, piling bodies up on like a giant slip and slide. I can see that. That's not safe. I haven't agreed with the person. Fine. Send the spring breakers home then. However, if that was the case and that was the problem, mobs of spring breakers, I asked this person in Florida why they simply didn't just reopen the beaches to the residents 2 weeks later when the spring breakers had all gone home. This person didn't really know, but was searching for another CNN or system-approved answer. They said, well, there'd still be crowds on the beach. It's Florida. Because it's Florida, there'll still be crowds. It's not safe. Now, okay, I kind of said, well, all the hotels are closed, right? How would there be crowds? But okay, there's no arguing with this person about Florida. Again, even though highly unlikely these crowds could come on Florida beaches with every hotel or motel in a 100-mile radius from the beaches closed off. And people generally terrified to leave home without a mask anyway. So I just let it go. And I turned the conversation a bit and asked then, why are the New Jersey beaches closed? I'm having this conversation end of March. Remember, end of March. Well, why are the New Jersey beaches closed then? 2 people I spoke to in March both told me crowds. What? March is winter in the Northeast. We've had 25 inches of snow in March here in Pennsylvania. I assure you, you can walk from Atlantic City along the beach to Dewey Beach or Rehoboth Beach in Delaware on most days in March, and you will only pass 1 or 2 people every mile you walk. 1 or 2. I can't explain why, but people are simply not willing to come out and just state the obvious. They just won't give in an inch in terms of straying away from the stories or the position that their masters want them to take. Why can't somebody just say to me, I agree, Matt. It doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense why they would close the beaches. Why can't somebody just be big enough to say that? I understand these other measures, Matt, but to close beaches and national parks that are tens of thousands of acres, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Nobody can go there. Okay, they wouldn't do it because that would crack open the door for loons like me. They won't open the door at all to a difference in opinion. It would then open the elevator door to my stinky fart, forcing them to consider that if that aspect of this story and that aspect of what their masters are doing to them makes no sense, then potentially other aspects may be just as flawed, and our government masters are not, in fact, perfect. Since it's a virtual impossibility to get anybody around me to admit that the closing of fishing holes, parks, and beaches is simply wrong, it's bordering on sinister, nobody will admit any part of that it's pointless for me to bring up the next topic I'd love to discuss with these same people. At what point did all of us forget that there is something called the Constitution, and no governor or president has a legal right to close a beach or a national park? Point to the part of the Constitution that explains their authority there. It doesn't exist, I assure you. Now, they may decide to send their park rangers home to hunker down, so there's no support out there if you get in trouble or something like that. But, Well, don't we own these parks too as citizens? I can be there at my own risk. Fine, send the park rangers home. But to bar the gates, or even worse, impose fines for those who would stroll through 10,000 acres at Valley Forge Park by themselves, this is in fact sinister. And to explain it away is a psychosis. Guess what? All of these emergency powers they speak of in their press conferences every day, there is no legal basis for any of it. Zero. I'll be sure zero on the strength. At least they could be honest, At least these authority figures, politicians, why not be honest? If they no longer use the Constitution before making laws, which we've known for quite some time that they don't consider the Constitution before making laws, well, don't patronize me with Supreme Court judicial nominee hearings on TV, where senators ask 100 questions about if that nominee will uphold the Constitution. Are you kidding? The NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act alone of 2014, I believe, allows an American citizen to be held indefinitely without a trial. How about the thing about jury of your peers? No. How about legal representation? No. So there's a law that violates the Constitution directly and it passed? Yeah. But that's not they've been violating the Constitution for decades. But the NDAA recently by itself trashed the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment of the Bill of Rights. Did you hear anything on the news about it? No? Well, go look it up if you think I'm just a crazy conspiracy theorist. It's called the NDAA. NDAA, indefinite detention, without 3 of the Bill of Rights. Then, of course, what do they do for us? They remind us of our rights and how free we are. Every 5 years or so, they read the preamble of the Constitution before the Super Bowl. And people believe they have rights. Oh, it just makes you feel so warm and fuzzy as they read that preamble to the Constitution as I'm pouring down my 10th beer before kickoff. Defend the actions if you want to, but there is no I'm just saying defend the actions as necessary if you believe there's a killer virus. But rest assured, there is no constitutional or legal basis for not allowing an American citizen to walk out of his or her house down the street or to walk on a beach. That should at least concern people. Nobody cares anymore. It's incredible. To defend these actions is insanity. Haven't you ever heard Ben Franklin's quote about those who are willing to trade liberty for security? And that person who would do that deserves neither and will get neither? With this CV thing going on now, people are willing to trade 10 years of misery, financial misery alone, 1 billion people getting flushed to save a few people from something that's a bit worse than seasonal flu. Really? Okay, it's fun fact time between sections. Fun fact number 2. The human body at any one time has billions of these things called viruses, just like it has billions of bacteria, and they all play an essential role in the body. Question number 3 to ask yourself. Do you think it's worth locking down the world for something that has not yet even gotten close to bypassing the regular seasonal flu in terms of severity? Did you know it's not even close to the regular seasonal flu in terms of severity? In some years, we're told 30 million people in the United States get the flu between October and March. 30 million, just in the U.S. Over 500,000 have died worldwide in some years when it's a real nasty regular flu. And yet, this CV lacks behind in all metrics of severity, except what they say the death rate is for those who contract it, especially for those over age 70. Okay, let's go online now and see what we have for April 7th. We have 385,000 cases in the U.S. Versus 30 million of the regular flu. And we have about 12,000 deaths. And we have what? 500 to 600,000 worldwide deaths? 12,000? So it hasn't eclipsed the regular flu, yet the entire world is basically in prison. The theme that will come out over and over as we move forward is, does this make any sense? Are the measures in line with what this is? Are the measures commensurate? Is the degree of pain that's going to be inflicted over the next 10 years commensurate? If not, And it doesn't matter how crazy you want to call me or a conspiracy theorist. If not, there is no other conclusion than something else is going on here. The news will scare you and say the death rate from CV is 10 times the regular flu. Well, 0 times 0 is 0. It's still maybe around 2%. So that's a scare tactic, 10 times. We'll get to that in another question, why the news is constantly out to scare. It's around 2% death for those who contract it, of which that's going to be a small percentage. So if E.T., for example, remember the old movie? E.T. Phone Home. Even people under 30 know about that movie, right? If E.T. flew back to Elliot's house recently in some sort of alien ship, what would he think? What would he think looking down at this situation, flying back to Earth? What would anybody think? He would kind of start picking up the news broadcasts as he flew past Mars, and he'd say to his E.T. wife, who made the trip with him, "Wow, look what's going on down there on Earth. Most of the world down there looks like it's in lockdown. It must be some sort of disease that kills everybody. This disease probably kills over half of everybody who contracts it, because look at all these measures they're taking. It's over the top. I lived down there with Elliot and his little sister. I didn't see anything like this. It must be the worst disease of all time." But what we're really talking about is a bad flu. Look, wife of E.T., they're pulling over all the cars with New York license plates, driving into Rhode Island and putting the people in quarantine. Look, they're pulling over all the cars with Pennsylvania license plates, and they're trying to cross into the Delaware, cross across the Delaware border, like Washington crossing the Delaware, and they're putting them in quarantine. And E.T.'s wife then, at that point, demands they turn that ship around and go home, saying, "If we land down there, E.T., we're dead meat. Phone him the fuck from home." What a surprise E.T. got when he learned that they had locked the world down over a virus that's a little worse than seasonal flu. 4. The next question to please ask yourself. Why is the news media out to scare the shit out of everybody? Is anybody trying to answer this question with something like this? Well, the news, they're taught to push sensationalism for their ratings. So in a life and death situation where the global economy is like a month away from a 1929 meltdown on steroids, which will then kill, just in China alone, probably 50 million people, not the 4,000 that CV killed in China. He killed a billion plus people. CV killed 4,000. That's a rounding error of a rounding error. Global economy melts down with 1929 on steroids. It could be 50 million in China. So all this going on, it's now life or death. The stakes are as serious as it gets. The news media is just still about ratings. Is that what the person would say? Will it really be great for the ratings when 100 million Americans are out of work? Will that be great for the ratings? Did somebody just say, well, yeah, they'll be home watching TV? Well, no, there won't be any advertisers on the news networks. All the products will be out of business. There'll be nothing other than alcohol ads and cat food ads. That's all that will be on. Of course, the big pharma companies will be pushing their drugs in 30-second long commercials. Actually, they're minute long. The first 30 seconds talk about the drug. The back 30 seconds talk about the endless list of side effects. Like that part of a drug commercial couldn't have been done away with 30 years ago. Now, when the news covered Italy, why was it that all we saw when they covered Italy for 2 weeks straight were horrific images of people on respirators with tubes stuck down their throat? Looked like they were packaged in the same type of wrapper that the Bubble Boy was in that Seinfeld episode, but it in a scary way. Why is that all they showed? Where were the other? Where's the other side of that story of Italy or anything related to CV? Where's the other side of the scale? Where's a woman being interviewed on Skype on the news, that the news showing that she's recovering on her own from bed? And she didn't need to go into a hospital. She didn't need to get a ventilator, and she's feeling much better, and she'll be back on her feet in a day or two. Where are those stories? Where are the stories of the people who got it and proclaimed from their webcam from home to the news that was really no big deal? Where are those stories? Don't you think a news media gives itself away when it's panic 24/7 all the time, and there's almost no stories balancing out with, I got through it. It was no big deal. I was really scared at first, but then, I recovered in 2 or 3 days. Where are those stories? Honestly, how do you explain that away if you are just a defender of everything this government is parroting to you and you like to parrot back? The fifth question you should ask yourself, why is the test, the CV test, and the testing in general such a big deal? What good does it do if you know you have Mr. 19 if there's absolutely nothing that can be done about it? There are many reasons why somebody may have 102-degree fever. What good does it do for that person to get up out of bed and drive to a testing center to get tested, or have somebody drive them to a testing center? What good does it do? Nothing can be done. Isn't that we've always been told about viruses? Now, I can certainly understand if this person at the test site in the hazmat suit gave you your results immediately, like a pregnancy test. I understand why you'd go out if this was the case, which it's not. You'd get yourselves immediately, they'd shake red or blue like a pregnancy test, and then a minute later, they'd hand you a little box, and it would be something like, take 2 of these and call me in the morning, and you'll be just fine. They gave you something that could cure you. Well, heck, all of this testing would make sense. But they don't do shit for you. They don't even give you their grandmother's chicken soup recipe when you drive up. They simply tell you to turn your car around and get well soon, you poor devil. Guess what? The results aren't immediate. They can take up to 5 days. Quarantine yourself. The results take up to 5 days, you poor devil. Now let's let another car drive through. As they drive away, the sick patient is giving the disease to the driver that drove him to the center, and they're both having a conversation about which one of them saw that guy pull out a new swab. Did he use a new swab at all? Because that tester looked a little tired, and one saying to the other, I think he swabbed me with somebody else's swab, the one he used on the guy before me. And somebody says, well, why do you think that? Because there's a piece of hot dog in my mouth, and I'm a damn vegetarian. Honestly, why all this talk on the news all the time about this test? If these are the facts, you're tested. If you have it, no, nothing can be done. Why is South Korea, for example, this story, one of hundreds about this test, South Korea is lauded, applauded for being able to roll out and mobilize enough tests, and the U.S., of course, has fallen short, and they're bashed and lambasted over not being prepared. In this case, the test is as useful as a test I developed to see if you have vampire DNA as a relative of Alexander Corvinus. Fun fact. A face mask can't stop something as small as a virus particle. A virus going through a face mask is like flying a model airplane through the Grand Canyon. In healthcare, masks traditionally have mostly been about protecting the patient. For example, somebody who sneezes in a mask will keep most of the projectiles from flying all over the supermarket shelves. However, the person wearing the mask thinks they have some sort of crack protection against this CV, like Ronald Weasley on his liquid luck protecting the 3 Quidditch loops from Slytherin beaters. The sixth question you should ask yourself, and if you didn't understand the technique by now, these are things to get you thinking potentially that what's being presented to us is not really what's happening. That's kind of the whole point here, if you didn't get it by now. 6, where are the dissenting viewpoints among all the voices of authority? Show me one governor, one president, prime minister, celebrity, or news anchor saying something like, this is a massive overreaction that will have far-reaching economic consequences, inflicting pain on billions. You have one person saying that? I didn't think so. How are they all lockstepping to the same tune across the board, almost worldwide? Think about it. Where are the dissenting voices? Where are the critics? Don't you see that's yet another sign that things here are not kind of what they seem to be? Remember those North Korean soldiers when they come for their parades? Those fancy-ass motherfuckers who high-step to the beat of Kim Jong-un or Il or whatever the fuck his name is now? We have now, right now, 10,000 voices of authority of some kind in the West, all doing that same fancy high-stepping, exactly in unison with each other, saying the exact same thing. Why isn't anyone in any of these classes, people who position themselves above you and me, above the regular people, where are they, or just one of them, I don't even need a group, just one person, saying, for example, it's wrong to close national parks, saying, for example, it's wrong to close beaches? Where's Brad Pitt on that? Where's Jane Fonda on that? Where's Governor Casey on that? Governor Casey? No, Governor Wolf. One reject is just as pathetic as the other. It's no fault of mine to confuse those two nerds. So I'm just a loon for saying, at best, their message is inconsistent. That's at best, meaning all rivers, streams, places to fish, beaches, all that needs to be closed down, but the Home Depot is still open. Is that consistent with the message they're bringing? The Home Depot is still open? Beaches closed, Home Depot open. It is essential for me to get shovels, rat poison, and garden gnomes. Question 7 to ask yourself, related to number 6, related to the one we just did, why are all the major corporations also lining up to give the exact same message? Honestly, think about how unnatural all of this perfect coordination is in all the commercials that are being presented across the board. Where's the dissent in any one corporation or any one major business? Whereas, I don't know, General Motors, for example, with a NRA-style message, a real pushback commercial aimed at Congress, saying something like, Congress, tell Dr. Fauci and his ghoul that we all get the flu. Now call your representative and tell Congress if America doesn't get back to work real soon, we're all done for. Where's that message? But in a politer and more professional way. In fact, the message of many of the corporations is going farther than the authority stooges and is even more strange and sinister. For example, why is State Farm in their commercials talking about the new normal? Why are any of these big companies talking about the new normal? What the hell does that even mean? Didn't China just show us the life cycle of this thing? You lock down Wuhan, you get your stay-at-home Netflix, your free lo-mein delivery without a delivery charge from February 1 to about March 15th. And if you're China, you walk away with just 4,000 deaths. Yay, we're done. Isn't that the life cycle? Shouldn't the life cycle of what just happened in China happen here? Or does the virus act differently here? Did it mutate again and they didn't tell us? Dr. Fauci and his ghoul didn't tell us? No, that's nothing. 4,000 deaths is nothing. If the denominator in the equation, which is China, is over 1 billion people, more people jump each day from Foxconn factories. Close to the end of March, this is what happened. China declared some sort of victory and replaced all the Pokemon posters around the country with thousands of posters celebrating their healthcare workers. This is true. I'm making up the Pokemon. Every bus stop and everything had, we celebrate our healthcare workers. I'm serious. Put these posters all over the train stations. So if we learn from China, we should just have a few more weeks of this until we get our all clear. And we can then put posters on the R5 SEPTA line out of Philadelphia celebrating our healthcare workers. So what the hell is State Farm and 50 other big companies talking about with this new normal crap? Again, that's not what just happened in China. What? What am I missing? I assure you, in terms of what these commercials are talking about the new normal, that in 1918, this thing called Spanish flu, which did wipe out about a quarter of the people in a lot of small towns, my great-grandfather died of it. It wiped out a lot of people, the Spanish flu of 1918. But did they talk about a new normal? Well, it just went back to work. Did their butchers and bakers and candlestick makers back then, they didn't have freaking State Farm, but they had the butchers and bakers and candlestick makers. Did they run a bunch of ads in their local newspaper talking about the new normal and wearing masks for the next 100 years and social distancing and permanent changes to society? And the Spanish flu wiped out magnitudes more than whatever's happening now. No, the work of the economy needed to continue, and it just went on. And good thing they weren't pussy-ass Peckerwood boys back in 1918. They just went back to work, or we wouldn't be where we are today, so we thank them. But we're just going to pussy down and hunker down inside because that's what our masters tell us to do. So what are they saying here? What do these corporations know? Why are, social distancing, murals being painted on, but in Ireland and around Europe about say so many feet apart if this thing's supposed to play its course out over 4 or 5 weeks. So this new normal thing, it does concern me. But if you want to scream conspiracy theorist at me, that's fine. But it screams of a plan. If it's supposed to run its course like any flu, and China showed us it does run its course, and every flu we've ever known for 100 years through 3 generations has run its course, then why would anybody be talking about a new normal unless that's the way it's planned? Again, you can't call me a conspiracy theorist because if it is a new normal and the virus keeps coming around, then remember what I'm saying now. How did they know? Question 8 to ask yourself. Let's go right back to the absolute basics. Does anybody listening to this know anybody who's died? Me neither. If you do, were they about age 80 or did they have a health condition? If so, they had about the same chance of dying from the regular flu. Again, the point here is not to debate the end of a flea's dick with you telling me how much more deadly and virulent this is because of certain statistics. Facts are the facts. The fact is, as of now, it has not eclipsed the severity of the regular flu in almost every metric. And we're locking the world down? And even if you think that it hasn't because of all of these wonderful, drastic, draconian measures that your masters are imposing on all of us, don't forget the main point here. Even if the spreading stops in a few weeks, okay, we'll look at what's coming down the road next as the next contestant on The Price is Right. This lockdown, even if the spreading stops, created the next contestant on The Price is Right. And our next contestant that will play the game for about the next 10 years is the bastard son of the Great Depression that will harm billions economically. Remember what we talked about? Poor quality food, no medication, stress of not being able to cover bills, stress of not being able to take care of your children. That creates hundreds of millions of cases of disease. Okay, this is indisputable. That's already, the stress of this thing has already caused more harm than saving the tens of thousands apparently that are being saved now. Harm billions to save millions? No. Harm billions to save thousands. That's what's going on here. Harm billions very severely to save thousands. Now, if you buy that story, I got a bridge. It goes from New York to New Jersey. I'm the outright owner. My grandfather deeded it to me. You meet me under that bridge. And for just $500, I'll sign it over to you tonight. Back to the question of this section. Do you know anybody who's died? I don't. In 1918, the older people interviewed said, do I know anybody who's died? Yeah, a quarter of my entire town. The damn bells, like Quasimodo, they did the bells thing. Then whenever somebody died, they ring the bells. The bells wouldn't shut up. That's what all the old people said, interviewed in their 90s, before they passed. It's all online. It's all on YouTube. So as of right now, it's not in its infancy. This thing's been playing out in China since December. It's not in its infancy. And almost everybody listening to this is going to say, do I know somebody directly or met someone that's died? We'd all basically say no. A few exceptions. But don't tell me about a story you heard from your uncle's, sister's, cousin's, brother's half-cousin. You didn't know that person. Do you know the person who's died? Really know them? Do you really know them? Almost no one listening to this will know anybody who's died. Even if you do you know how broad-reaching and poor the test is? Meaning, did they die of CV or did they die from something else? You have CV and you have CV markers in you right now just for being a human being. Everybody has CV markers in them just for being a human being. Very natural, common. The test is broad-reaching and ineffective. You could swab an old shoe and test it positive for CV most of the time. We've all had CV many times in our life. Thus, why the Lysol can has boasted about killing it since about 1950. And finally, the last section, because people are generally incapable of questioning the official story, incapable of questioning the narrative that comes out of their government or the people they turn to as their authority figures. They will ignore basic common sense and ignore basic, you could call it cause and effect. Cause and effect. Say you have a heating and air conditioning company that comes and gives you a new air conditioning system. And the very next day, everybody in your house is getting sick from the air conditioning system. Would you think they're related? You would think they're related, right? As soon as we turn the new air conditioning, everybody starts getting sick. Yeah, they're related. It's called cause and effect. Cause and effect. If you're on an elevator and there's a giant 800-pound gorilla on that elevator and there's this horrible fart smell of like stale bananas, where do you think it's coming from? It's cause and effect. So you take a map, a world map of where this thing is hitting hard, okay? And then you take another map and you lay it right on top. And the other map is new cell technology, 5G rollout. the maps are extremely similar. Oh, this guy was making sense, and now he's just a conspiracy theorist. Really? If you want to ignore basic cause and effect, go right ahead. But you put the maps on top of each other, there's a correlation. Okay? And how do you explain there are many, we've had a global economy for how long now? People flying all over the place. Even people from the U.S. on the Peace Corps, they go all into Africa, and they go to Laos, and they go to even Myanmar and closed off. Everybody goes all over. This is what has been happening since approximately 1970. So how could there possibly be countries that have no cases, basically nothing going on with this? People just super healthy there. They eat a bunch of mangoes that we don't have access to. They squeeze lemons directly into their mouth. See, there might be another reason for what the sickness is. Match up your maps. Incidences, cases, what's called 5G cell technology. Considering how global the world is in terms of people coming and going and air travel and cargo ships and all this stuff, if anything that's spread the way they say it spreads and is virulent or has the, I don't know what they call it, like an R factor of spreading, the way they say it does, there wouldn't be any countries that have no cases or next to no cases. And there are. There's always an excuse. I'm sure you can find a lot of Google-approved websites that'll just tell you bad reporting. In terms of seeing how the world works, you're certainly not going to understand it just from this presentation. But in terms of trying to get your mind in a place where you want to really understand how the world works, this is the last chance for people. The last chance. What's happening now with their presentation of what the CV thing is and people going along with every bit. I just proved every bit of the government narrative defies all semblance of common sense. There is one chance left to kind of splash water in your face to see how things really work before becoming basically a permanent zombie that will just parrot back whatever the state wants you to parrot back. Now is the time. Now is the time. I hope you use this time to discover certain things about yourself and certain things about how the world really works.